Feels strange knowing that this show has carried on for an actual year, technically. Let's talk about started near the beginning of 2019 as an offshoot of what I and a member of the Inner Circle were doing at the time, video game commentaries. Your gracious host used to be a part of a Hellfire Comms knockoff, but in a good way. We had chemistry that was worthwhile, I, the video game expert, and he of the Inner Circle, the color commentator, a regular Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan, or Iron Mike Tenay and Don West. Hell, I'm still like that, more interested in the nitty-gritty behind a game and its mechanics, two examples being Illbleed or Harvester. And oh boy, do I have a game that has a story to tell. Buckle up because this is going to be mean. What better way to celebrate Valentine's, let's talk about its anniversary, than by tearing down one of the worst pieces of interactive media I've had the displeasure of playing. For posterity's sake, let's talk about Devil May Cry 2. Picking up right where I left off of Devil May Cry, the game was both a commercial and critical success. Hideki Kamiya with Team Little Devils and Capcom breaking new ground by introducing a completely new genre to the world of gaming that would become a hype for some of my favorite entries and collection of some of the dopest soundtracks and hypest moments. But all was not to last, at least for Kamiya and Little Devils. See, one detail I didn't go over during the Devil May Cry video was that Capcom themselves greenlit a sequel without the knowledge of Kamiya, Little Devils, and even before 1 saw release. Kamiya himself wasn't alerted to what Capcom was doing until 2 was basically out the door. So who is in charge of this sequel? Ring of Unsolved Mysteries, because this man doesn't exist.
Last night, somebody broke in and stole over $500 of shit from my place!
No, seriously, out of all of gaming's rabbit holes, locating the original director for Devil May Cry 2 is one that hasn't found an end. Instead, all we have are the words of Daigo Ikeno, tenured artist for Capcom, from Devil May Cry 3142 explaining the situation. Capcom had traditionally been split into two main pillars, the arcade division and the console division, but the PlayStation 2's increased processing power and a change in the nature of Capcom's arcade game market meant a company-wide shift of human resources from arcade to console, with the company's big hits at the time, like Resident Evil and DMC, many of the arcade fighting game teams were switched over to teams making games for the home consoles. These former arcade division employees were put in charge of the DMC sequels. I was working for an independent studio when the DMC2 team asked if I would join the project, so I was hired to do character design, monster design, and some stage design. Speaking further, Daigo confirms in the interview that most of the staff working on 2 were originally members of Capcom's arcade division with a "that's right," more specifically people who had mostly worked on fighting games. They were mixed in with a number of others who had worked on DMC1. The producer was Tanaki-san, Tsuyoshi Tanaka, who had only just joined Capcom. Funamizu-san, Noritaka Funamizu, basically gave the DMC2 team free rein, encouraging us to do what we wanted. In charge was a team that didn't fully get the appeal of Devil May Cry 1 or Dante and was essentially their first effort. Not a great combination for development, despite Tsuyoshi Tanaka trying to fan down the flames of worry. Interviewed by Eurogamer, Tanaka explains the dumbed-down difficulty of Devil May Cry 2 with, yes, the original Devil May Cry was perhaps too hard. On the surface, Devil May Cry 2 looks similar in that it's, again, an action game with lots of gunplay, but as a game concept, DMC2 is totally different. It's made so that anyone could clear the stages and unlock hard mode. Continuing further, Tsuyoshi had the gall to say that once you finish it for the first time, it gets really deep. It might take as much as 50 hours or more to completely unlock the game. It's the kind of game that might take 3 months to crack if you keep practicing. Playing the game on hard mode will take much longer and provide a bigger challenge. The enemies become far more intelligent, attack in different ways, and require a lot more skill to beat, and we think it will at least take 50 hours to unlock all of the game's many secrets. You could be still playing this game in 3 months' time. Not to show my hand too early and to slightly lessen the blow against a first-time producer, but that's a fucking lie. Particularly the 50 hours and depth parts, with the development spiraling into utter chaos, the original director and team out frolicking with the fairies, Capcom had no choice but to fire that man and place supplementary aide Hideki Itsuno in his role. Itsuno's background is a rap sheet for anyone who lived in the arcades. The Alpha series for Street Fighter, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Heritage for the Future, Darkstalkers, and Capcom vs. SNK 2 were some of the games he worked on, the latter two he directed. In fact, Itsuno was coming off of CVS PS2 when he was picked, per his words in Famitsu and mangled by Google Translate. After Capcom vs. SNK 2 was over, I was in the process of planning to launch an original RPG. When I was thinking about going on a trip to Machu Picchu, I decided to become the director of DMC 2 because you seem to be free. Not to go on a tangent, but that original RPG Itsuno was planning for would eventually become Dragon's Dogma, the best non-Berserk game. Coincidentally, many who worked on Devil May Cry 2, like Daigo Akino and model supervisor Ju Nikawa, would assimilate into Itsuno's team for the fledgling RPG. In another interview, this time for US Gamer, Itsuno describes his selection with, "So, the Devil May Cry 2 project actually wasn't going terribly well at one point in development and they needed someone to come in and help them get it on track again. My boss was saying, who should we have deal with it? And he just kind of said, Itsuno, you do it. And at first I was like, seriously? But I took the mission on with a mind to doing the best I could." Joining Devil May Cry 2 at around the halfway point of its development, Itsuno had an uphill battle. Most animations were implemented save for Dante's horrendous stinger, and a due date was barreling down towards the director. In half a year, Itsuno managed the impossible, releasing a working game on January 25th, 2003 for the PlayStation 2 that was still trashed by those who enjoyed 1's tough but fair difficulty. Capcom is solely to blame for this travesty, underhanded tactics, and not providing enough time for development, the key issues pertaining to 2's failure in the creation sense. Vice versa, while selling enough to be considered a hit, 2 is ravaged for simplicity, the lowering of the difficulty a contentious point for many a critic and fan of the first game. While I don't know when was the first instance of this, as gaming is filled with this issue, Devil May Cry 2 had problems targeting an audience as it rejected what made the first game so good while pandering to a crowd that didn't like one. Kamiya has gone on record in saying that Itsuno is not to blame for DMC 2's failings, and he ultimately did the best he could do with a team that didn't know what they were doing. In the halls of Itsuno's library, though, Devil May Cry 2 might be his most important game. Circa the Famitsu interview and translated by Siliconera, I joined in the middle of development. Development on the title was difficult, and I joined as a director and advisor in the later half of the development. How I became director and advisor is a strange story in the first place. However, the development time for Devil May Cry 2 was too short, and I couldn't make something I was satisfied with. After the development of Devil May Cry 2 was finished, I asked, please let me make Devil May Cry 3.
Sweet dreams.
Mentioned in the DMC1 video, Devil May Cry 2 was shacked up alongside its prequel and sequel in the Devil May Cry HD collection, March 29th, 2012 for PlayStation Triple and 360, and as a standalone on the Switch come September 19th, 2019. This isn't where the story ends, mind you, as released within the same year as 2 was another sequel, this one in a series also featuring demons. Shin Megami Tensei, or more specifically, Shin Megami Tensei 3. While completely off topic, it was 2's version of Dante that would become iconic via his cameo in the Vortex world with the release of Nocturne Maniacs, or over here in the West, Nocturne, our first SMT game. His appearance replaced with Raido Kuzunoa in Maniacs Chronicle. Dante's inclusion was all because a member of Nocturne's team thought the character was cool. Explained by Koji Okada at TGS 2003, one of the staff members who happened to be a big fan of the DMC series came up with the idea of including Dante from Capcom's in an upcoming SMT game. At first I thought it was a crazy idea, but realized that Dante is a devil hunter and this might actually work out, and presented the Nocturne game concept to Capcom. Before we presented the idea, we created a movie with Dante in it so that Capcom would have a better understanding of how we would like to incorporate Dante in our game. The movie is the scene where Dante jumps off a building and lands behind the main character with guns drawn. We used strategy guides and other reference materials to create the movie. It turned out great, and we were confident that Capcom would like it, just as we thought. They loved it, and the rest is history. With my decision to play Devil May Cry 2 on New Game Plus Hard, I'm using the PS Triple HD Collection version, inferring that I've played this game at least 4 times. God help me. Our tale opens up with a recap of the legend of Sparta, the demon who woke up to justice, and the son that has taken his place, Dante. As we bear witness to words spoken in the past, we peep a new character, Lucia, traipsing in a museum finding a mysterious amulet that seems to have caught some demons' attention.
Humanity's hope lived in a demon named Sparta, with a spirit unlike any other, and wielding the sword that bore his own name, Sparta eradicated the demons. And now, the legend of Sparta has been inherited by his son, the demon slayer, Dante.
Also Dante's, who has been hired by Lucia and her mother Mathieu for a job out on the island of Vidi Marly. Head of the Ouroboros company, Arius has been operating out of the island country in an attempt to find the Arcana, artifacts capable of granting their collector the untold power of Argosax, another demon lord different from Mundus. So while Dante stirs the pot in the city, Lucia finds the other Arcana and confronts Arius, the magician telling her the truth. She is an artificial demon created by him.
Well, it appears that the defect is back.
Defect?
You are my creation.
Liar! Mathieu is my mother.
She merely found you when you were about to be disposed of, and then raised you as a soldier. Is that what you consider to be a mother?
No! I don't believe you.
Look. You have the mark on your shoulder. Proof that you're a mannequin. Kai. That is your real name. Now, give me the Arcanas. With them, my power will be complete, and I will become like the immortal Argosax. I will achieve absolute wisdom and transcend all. The world is already warped. Everything that belongs to the devils will eventually revert to its original form. Even you will betray your upbringing and turn on the humans.
Sent into a tizzy, Lucia is unable to stop herself from being teleported away by Arius, forcing her to trudge to one of his offices to challenge him. She loses, but Dante reconvenes with the Arcana, trading them for Lucia's life.
You show promise, but did you really think you could deceive me? Have you come back to me, Kai?
I'm Lucia. Don't call me Kai.
Then why did you come here? Let me guess. You seek my death.
Die!
I must obtain the power of Argosax, or I cannot transcend all living things.
Too easy.
You cannot win. Someone is holding you back.
Forget about me. Kill Arius.
Don't worry. I've got you.
With a hellmouth on the horizon, Dante tells Lucia not to sweat it, with Mathieu adding that while they aren't mother and daughter by blood, they are by bond.
The ritual was activated because of me.
There's still time.
We have until the sun is completely eclipsed. But how are you going to enter the building? The entrance is...
Where there's a will, right?
Mother?
Yes, it is true that we are not tied by blood. But our ties are bound by history and experience, which is much deeper than blood. Now go. Everything I know, I have passed on to you. You are my daughter.
Thank you, Mother.
Head back in the game, Lucia alongside Dante invade the inner sanctums of Arius, our now coin-obsessed devil hunter, tricking Arius into using a Devil May Cry commemorative coin in the ritual instead of the corresponding arcana. Crowning the false king, Dante saves the day, but Lucia wants him to put her out to pasture. Not his first rodeo, Dante gives her the Devils Never Cry speech, unclouding Lucia's mind as he enters the Hellmouth proper to destroy Argersax and the despair embodied on the whim of a game of chance.
You defeated Arius. There's just one thing left. Kill me. Kill me and everything will be over. I thought I was a descendant of the clan that protects Vie de Marly. The ones who have the blood of the devils. But the truth is, I was created by Arius. I could become a monster and attack the humans at any time. Now, kill me. It's your job to hunt devils. What? The ritual was incomplete. But the door to the demon world is... Wait. What are you doing?
My job is hunting devils.
Once you enter the demon world, you may never be able to return. I'll go. I'm expendable. You don't need to worry about me. I'm happy if I can die like a human.
No. Devils never cry.
But...
Let's leave it to fate. Heads, I go. Tails, you go. See you around.
Don't you want to hear the story about Sparta from Mathieu?
I know. He did the same thing. Hold on to my coin, Lucia.
Lucia doesn't end this story empty-handed either, taking Dante's coin to reveal that it was double-headed and slaying Arius for good. Our story ends with Lucia waiting for Dante at Devil May Cry, as it was told that those that enter hell never leave, though Dante did that in 1, yet Sparta was able to, and Dante acquiring another gig, this one from an old blonde-haired man who hands him a menorah. Psych, but I like to believe the events of the Vortex World and Labyrinth of Amala are canon to Dante. Despite Devil May Cry 2 going for a tale of two halves, in the end this is the Lucia show, as she is the one that gets the most character development on account for Dante's weird shift into stoicism. Most of what made him a likable guy has been sucked out with a bendy straw, leaving only this strange interpretation of the character that would be elaborated on only later and in a much better way. What I can applaud is the continuation of the theme that Dante has outgrown Sparta, his father not an important figure anymore since Dante has essentially taken his place as defender of Earth. That's why we never hear the story of the lost common rider for Matier, as it's utterly superfluous. Dante no longer has to live up to his father's legacy, he's instead crafting his own brighter one. Switching back over to Lucia, it's she that learns the lesson of Devils Never Cry, a reassurance that even if one is part demon, they have the choice to embrace their humanity. What Lucia does bring to the table is an aspect that hasn't been explored yet for Devil May Cry, the self-hating devil. Dante up till now hasn't had any gripes with his devil half, accepting it as a part of his strengths, in this case physical. He knew where he came from and sought out to become like his father, surpassing the legendary Dark Knight via human spirit. Lucia meanwhile lived a good chunk of her life not knowing of her ancestry, nay artificiality, thus when she is told of her demonoid homunculus status, she begs Dante for death. Of course, this self-awareness more than implies that Lucia has a soul, Dante outright telling her as such. Where this stumbles is that, well, that's about as far as it goes. Outside of Lucia struggling to come to terms with herself, which takes up minimal screen time, Devil May Cry 2 doesn't dive too deep into the self-loathing angle that a certain entry would use as a backdrop for its conflict. All I'm saying is that much with a lot of elements within this game, later sequels would take advantage of actually implementing ideas, 3 and 5 bringing to the forefront Dante's quibbles with his devil side. Not helping matters is that unlike with 1, which tells a cozy story with few players, 2 tries to come across as this grandiose event with a lacking main and supporting cast. Compared to Mundus, Arius seems Bush League, a fact at odds with his social standing and aim to become the next Demon Lord? Darkness Devil? Hell if I know, he's just a power-hungry fool whose basest connection to the plot lies with Lucia and a worse-off version of Mundus and Dante's relationship. There was chemistry between Mundus and Dante, doubly so since Mundus was talked up as being big-dicked, his generals mentioning him on the reg, and definitely delivered the goods, silencing Griffin and taking Trish as hostage. Outside of holding on to Lucia as bait for Dante and the Arcanas, Arius is a passive passenger along for the ride, hurting his credibility as a threat. Most he does is let people move into position before sicking a crony on them like Furataurus while twirling his mustache like the generic evil businessman that he is. When he's at his most intriguing is when Arius goes nutso, only happening when Dante tricks him by the end, and it's only because Arius turns into a pork pie with how much ham and dough he's rolling around in. Montier serves little purpose other than as an exposition fairy and shoulder for Lucia, their conversation substituting Dante and Trish's from the first game. Again, the theme of Devils Never Cry has expanded to include reasons for fighting such as family regardless of blood or bond with this inclusion, but 2 is too worried that the audience might get bored and drop kicks the stick shift so that you can never tell what gear you're in. Arius has like 6 demons under him, but outside of Bulwark, the shameless Nilo Angelo stand-in, none particularly stand out due to their one-and-done nature. Dante had 3 encounters with all of Mundus's generals, providing a bit of banter and substance to what were admittedly flat entities. I remember Dante telling off Phantom or Griffin, but here in 2, there's nothing. Only Trismagia talks to Dante and Lucia before he fights them, and the back and forth is soulless. Keeping with this, you could make the argument that most of the dialogue between the characters is wooden to a bad degree. Make no mistake, Devil May Cry 1 could print a book, but the paragraphs in it would bear some form of heart or charm. Hailing from a tokusatsu background does that to you, but in earnest, a story speaks to me more when it carries that sort of genuinity. I defend both the line and read for Fill Your Dark Soul with Light, as it comes from an impassioned, albeit awkward stance both within the writing and voice work. Every issue Devil May Cry 2's story suffers from can be traced to one singular point: Dante. Not who he is, but the metamorphosis he's undergone. As if to reflect the shallow coolness that Dante has been forced to adopt, the story of 2 lacks any pizzazz, witty insults, or fun. It put on one trench coat and begged with feigned aloofness to be taken seriously, not understanding what details go into making a story have impact. Underlying one's playful nature were moments of somberness. I'll always recall back to Griffin's death, the point where Dante makes his stand against Mundus. Throughout all their encounters, Dante and Griffin hammed it up, but once Featherface bit the big one, Dante's vehement hatred came out to spite Mundus for betraying one of his underlings in his time of need. No moment like that ever happens within 2, as it thinks it's too cool to show emotion of any kind, and whatever displays it does try to put upon are merely an act of a few seconds, this narrative unsure of where it wants to go. Wholeheartedly, you can take out Dante from this plot and very little would change. This story doesn't benefit from him existing in it. Quite the contrary, he detracts from the structure as it feels obligated to give him something to do, which takes away from character building. Beginning to end, Dante is static, but this plot wants him in the limelight, even if that would put a damper on who the true main character is. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Devil May Cry 2 is a rice cake, inoffensive in the truest sense of the word, but bland and unfulfilling. Out of all the parts that make up Devil May Cry 2, the presentation is about the only one that stands on its own. For a PlayStation 2 game, it holds up in the graphics department to some extent. This is where I separate that term and art direction, as while the Isle of Vie de Marly is varied as a location housing a modern metropolis alongside old ruins and classical Italian architecture, which for the time and even now looks nice. The direction of the city is uncharacteristically, for this series, mundane and tame. A picture can be shot brilliantly, but that doesn't mean the subjects are worth shooting. There's no life to the unnamed city Dante and Lucia venture through, nor is there any in the ruins, factory, or high-rise they explore. A bigger problem, there's also no connective sinew tying each location to the next, making each new area feel like its own reality. Malay Island was a gorgeous gothic nightmare that worked because all the corridors and strange side rooms were connected. Malay was a character to itself, which was only heightened when you delved deeper. You could make inferences about the inhabitants or come up with a backstory for why certain rooms existed or their purposes. There was an air of danger surrounding Malay that isn't here in Vie de Marly. This new island is supposedly under the control of a demon businessman, but outside of the roaming demon population and when hell starts encroaching onto our world, you can barely tell how cursed the location is. Perhaps when first starting out, the outskirts of the island, while archaic, would still cling on to some form of human geometry that was being bulldozed. Then, once in the city proper, you come face to face with a demonic artifice masquerading as a modern human city, displaying how deeply rooted Arius and his crew is in the town. Vie de Marly is booked as a literal city of demons, but nothing clues you into that, so while it looks great, what lies below is lacking in merit and artistic vision. At least most of the character designs make up for that, this version of Dante keeping the visual appeal that made his previous entry stand out. Lucia herself and Arius aren't too bad either. In all honesty, a lot of the human character designs in Devil May Cry are hard for me to talk about as they generally land the mark. There's no ill-fitting design elements, and ultimately this aspect is down to preference, as is this whole video, so I won't spend too long on characters as they look great. Creature designs are one of the few pieces of the presentation where it fumbles, as I hope you like color swaps in the dull way. Your regularly fought foes flounder out looking like loafing lookalikes, the major clans taking up too much of the spotlight from the others who are equally uninteresting. Do you like Baphomet? No, not that one. Or that one. But this one. Well, good, because the Goatlings are bremidic and needy for a haul over. The craziest the common monsters get is the Infestant, if that. Not to discredit the giant see-through bugs, but the Sargasso and Blades make a reappearance for this sequel, both heads and shoulders above invisible water roaches, skeletons in metal cages, and green golems in brown pants. What a killer's row this game has. At least the bosses on the visual front clearly had some thought put into them. You don't forget the likes of the building monster made up of bats like Nephestirus or Skull Knight himself, Bulwark. There are some duds here and there, Tartarusan and Plutonian beefed up versions of the Finis and Argosax ripping off Nightmare's Blobstick, but I can see this grouping in a good game. Too bad they aren't, as I will cover later. Moving on to animations, damn Itsuno, what was left of his team got done in only a few months. Dante and Lucia are brilliantly animated owing to the advancement of mocap to catch every detail. This applies to both their attack strings, Dante's 5-hit launcher buried deep into my mind, though that might be because Nocturne reuses the animation, and how they move in cutscenes. Both in-game and pre-rendered are used like before, either matching the standard set by one, leaving me with nothing to write home about. Voice cast has changed, Max Steel's Matt Kaminsky taking the mantle of Dante. He's not a bad fit, but he's rarely given speaking time, most of it going to Francois Graliski's Lucia and Sherman Howard's Arius.
King? Yeah. Here's your crown.
Bit of half and half here, as I can blame script/directing and the VAs for awkwardness. Graliski, the prominent candidate for my ire. She doesn't sound natural, ironic seeing as Lucia isn't, but her whole deal is that she has a soul, something Graliski has a hard time getting across. This was her only role, by the way. Under Sherman's performances is Derek Powers from Batman Beyond, which is why I speak of this being a joint venture of bad direction and acting, as Sherman is awesome as Blight. Musically, there's a desire that hasn't been met. DMC2's soundtrack isn't bad per se, it carries way too many atmospheric tracks, letting the battle themes fall to the wayside. Couldn't tell you a single track name or when they play, the only familiar ones popping up being Dante and Lucia's first battle theme, as his has weird vocal growlings, while hers is a techno bop. No Psycho Siren to be heard, no Ultraviolet to be appreciated. If you're gonna include Phantom, why not give him Red Hot Juice instead of what he got? Devil May Cry 2 is a character action game, dropping the puzzle and collecting elements from 1 to indulge fully in combat. On the scale of character action games, it lies in the middle of jazz and orchestra, leading close to the latter. For sake of brevity, a hilarity if you've come this far, much of what Dante was capable of doing in the last game he can do here. Off the bat, he immediately has access to a double jump and the stinger, but a few extra moves have snuck their way in. Dante now has a dodge map to circle, or whatever would use that button, which has slightly generous iframes, allowing him to avoid attacks without jump canceling. As a double-edged sword, jump cancelling's role in this game has been greatly diminished, enemy hiking either not possible or fiddly. If you want to avoid damage, you have to roll, but that is not all that button does, as rolling into a wall will make Dante scale it Matrix style. There's not a lot of purpose to this move outside of getting additional height to make a jump, but it looks cool and that's all the justification it needs. Lastly, Dante has a few unlisted attacks for some of his weapons, mainly ebony and ivory, the shotgun, and his swords. These would be Twosome Time, Fireworks, and a strange shove that I never saw the purpose of. Twosome Time allows you to fire at 2 different enemies at the same time, requiring you to input a direction on the control stick while using E and I. I did Fireworks once and never understood how I got it to come out, and the shove might as well not exist for how pointless it is. Dante's core attacks are still centered around a 4-hit string, but this time to do his other combos, you have to move the control stick during a set period of it to get the other ones. In total, he has a 3-string that comes out quickly and launches horizontally, his 4-string, a 5-string that launches upward, and a 6-string that I rarely landed in a fight due to how unreliable this system is. Locking on is still a feature, with Dante able to use launcher / high time and stinger after doing so, but he can only perform his basic 4-hit when locked on, as stinger and launcher / high time take priority. High time has a proper follow-up in the form of aerial rave, but it only comes out if Dante is locked on, otherwise he'll do helm splitter. New to the game is Lucia, and much of what applies to Dante applies to her, though instead of using guns, she has 2 types of knives, the cranky bombs, and a crossbow for her underwater sections. Her combos also come out differently. Same goes for Trish, but I ain't playing this game a 5th fucking time. Devil Trigger is unlocked from the get-go for all 3, but there have been some tweaks to it. It still provides the damage increase and health regen, but weapons no longer decide what abilities Dante or Lucia gain when in DT, as all their weapons are the same minus some stat distributions. Instead, collectible amulets grant different bonuses when in DT, such as the returning air raid, increased damage in DT, and changing elemental types. Each category can be applied to DT, but only one of each can be given to DT. In other words, if you want to run fast, you'll lose air raid. If you want increased regeneration, you'll lose attack up. And if you want fire, you'll lose ice. Luckily, these can be switched around within the menu at your leisure. Added to Dante's DT is Majin Devil Trigger, bolstering him when at low health. Only usable when his health is flashing red, Dante becomes completely invulnerable for as long as he has DT. His attacks hit harder than base DTs, and he gains essentially every other ability from the amulets and some more. What he can't do is exit manually, but using Devil Stars can prolong Majin form. Dante and Lucia's main sword or dagger is also switched out through the menu. Quick switching has been dropped, but guns can be now cycled through on the fly with a press of a button. A thing to note is that while swords and daggers can be upgraded for damage, they no longer have associated skills with them like Alastor or Ifrit from 1. Guns, meanwhile, can finally be upgraded, the player needing red orbs to do so alongside buying other items from the shop such as Vital or Devil Stars or the other colored orbs. Blue, purple, and yellow orbs make their return, as do the blue orb fragments and hidden rooms. Most of this game structurally is going from A to B while solving a minimum amount of basic puzzles, hit object to activate door, or fighting enemies with the occasional boss thrown in. Another big change has been added to Devil May Cry in terms of fighting, as 2 marks the first time the style rankings play a part. Dealing damage to enemies, except for using guns, which cause it to stay at whatever rank it currently is at, causes the style meter to rise, starting from D and going to S. When enemies are killed, they drop more orbs the higher the rank. Getting hit or not hitting an enemy will send your style back down to unranked, so do be mindful. At the end of a level, you're ranked with set categories like time, red orbs collected, style rank, damage, and item usage. Despite this being the first game with well-defined rankings, don't get too antsy if you get bad ones. This game hates you. you. Like before, you are set to normal difficulty when booting up, only unlocking hard for Dante or Lucia after beating their campaigns for the first time. Yeah, Dante and Lucia are considered separate, so beating the game with only Dante only unlocks his side of the game. Unlike before, beating the game for the first time grants access to a level select in case you missed anything in a previous stage. Trish is also playable after completing hard. Rounding out the game is the introduction of Bloody Palace mode, a gauntlet of different fights and 999 floors. Try at your own risk, as this isn't 3 or 4 or 5. Much of what I'm going to say here comes with the caveat that it's from my left instead of my right. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. What doesn't fall under that is parts of the presentation. Though I've probably made mention to it earlier, I'll confirm it right now. This is my favorite design for Dante. There's something I enjoy about how the black and red of his coat mix together along with the separated coattails that make him stand out to me. I'm a big sucker for waist capes, shoutouts to Wizard, and that's how those coattails function at times. Previously referenced, this was the model used for Nocturne, and it basically solidifies my love for this outfit and its inclusion. Lucia herself has a good design as well, contrasting Dante with mostly white as opposed to his deep reds and blacks. It also befits her nature as a guardian figure, white the color of purity. Before leaving the presentation in this section, the cutscene choreography is pretty neat both in the pre-rendered and in-game scenes. The usage of mocap is making itself more prominent in this series, with characters seemingly coming across as more animated. The little exchange between Lucia and Dante at the end when they cross weapons displays this quite well, and even though it happens damn near 3 times in the plot, I'll never tire of seeing Dante free fall off a skyscraper. Again, too bad though that Nocturne replicates the scene in a game that isn't utterly trite. Before moving on to completely smash this game into oblivion, I'm not the kind of guy that doesn't give credit where it is due. Devil May Cry 2 fully implements a style ranking for combos and is the first to do so, unlike with 1 where combos were barely a concept if that, 2 transitions them to a centerfold mechanic. Taking damage now has an added negative connotation as not only are you losing health, whatever rank your combo was at drops. Now, I will say it's a tad too stringent, resetting your rank to nothing as opposed to lowering it by 2, but the groundwork has been laid out to be built upon. Seconding those are the style actions. On the press of a button, Dante has access to an on-demand dodge, useful for when things get too hairy and when jump canceling. Oh yeah. Anyway, this would later serve as the basis for 3's Trickster style, opening up Dante's moveset to include offensive and defensive options mapped comfortably in his repertoire. While it is awkward in this first go-around, as Circle does literally everything and is context-sensitive, there's no button combos, and oddity as the arcade division is on this one, the attempt to diversify Dante's moves can be given a golf clap. 2's biggest overall positive is the increased effectiveness of guns. While this is paradoxically the biggest stain on 2's reputation as well, I won't deny that the guns being so good would serve as foundation for gunslinger style. While the guns in 1 were deliberately designed and effective, the shotgun and grenade launcher covering the legwork in my playthrough of 1, they didn't get the same treatment as the devil arms lacking associated skills. 2 rectified this by not only allowing you to level them up, but by adding abilities to specific ones, such as twosome time for the pistols and throwing knives, and fireworks for the shotgun, 2 defining moves for Gunslinger. Next to the guns, Devil Trigger has seen a complete overhaul in terms of customizability. The weakest part of Devil Trigger in the first game was that it was solely reliant on what weapon you were using. Dante only had access to Air Raid if he was using Alaster or Meteor with Ifrit, and Sparta wasn't able to access DT, effectively making its increased damage output useless in regards to the previous Devil Arms. 2's approach to DT is much better, allowing you variations in skill and damage types as well as augmenting DT's functionality. Akin to what I've said earlier in this section, this would be later implemented in 4 with purchasable skills connected to DT or Dante, removing the rigidness and allowing the player to use any weapon in the form while still having utility abilities. And though DT in 1 did slightly change up Dante's moveset, here in 2 there is a noticeable difference with animations changing completely for certain attack strings and familiar combos only accessible within the mode. Going even further, there is Majin Devil Trigger as a last resort, another fledgling idea that would be greatly expanded come 5 with its Sin Devil Trigger. Conceptually, this is what makes Devil May Cry 2 an oddity. A lot of gameplay decisions from 3 onward have their start within 2, so on the whiteboard, 2 is a solid game. Where it fails is execution, and by the time I've recited its last rites, we'll see a beheading that would make old Sanson proud. Where Devil May Cry 2 falls flatter than AJ Styles in a debate with Bryan Danielson is that it is boring to such a painful degree that it would be classified as grade A torture material by the Vogons. There is absolutely no getting around this. Combat in 2 is just not fun. It goes both ways, as Dante and Lucia's movesets lack any kind of showiness or function outside of guns, and the enemies don't attack or corral you in engaging ways. Starting with our main characters, dropped was the stagger combo system. In 1, to do certain strings, you had to time out your button presses. Say you want to do million stabs, that's 2 regular swings, followed by a long pause. Then you start mashing the attack button for the move. In Devil May Cry 2, as opposed to making combos or strings easy to come out with a system that worked, we now have to deal with what I will dub the directional combo system. I call it that as you have to input a movement on the control stick to get certain combinations of attacks. From the get-go, whether locked on or not, Dante and Lucia have a basic 4-hit. However, while not locked on and pressing any direction before initiating the 4-hit, it will change to a shorter 3-hit that launches. Maybe. The core combo changes to a 5-hit with a launcher if the stick is moved after the 3rd hit and a 6-hit after the 4th in the basic string. This system adds more work to the player's plate as you are now incorporating a different button to do basic attacks without properties. With staggering, that's all one button, and it was generous with the timing. Here, not only do you have to keep track of 2 windows, the control stick and what frame the basic combo is on, you can't engage with this system while locked on. You know, the other core system this franchise has. When locked on, you default to using the 4-hit with no controller stick movement, changing that. And remember, Dante and Lucia have their launcher and stinger, which overwrites every basic move. You can be in the middle of a combo, then accidentally do stinger or launcher because you locked on and nubbed the control stick. That's why staggering is important to basic attacks and directional for extra property attacks, so you get the moves you want to use out without confusing yourself or accidentally using a move you didn't want to use. Speaking of Stinger and High Time, both versions of them are the worst in this game. Stinger's role in the series has always been as a ground-based horizontal launcher intended for Trickster or Gunslinger follow-ups, which 2 fulfills, albeit poorly for reasons later, or as a close-the-distance attack. That means Stinger should fling Dante far and fast to whatever he's locked onto. Those words are insulted by being placed next to 2's Stinger. Comical is the only way I can describe this Stinger, as it has too many frames to be considered viable in any scenario. For a comparison, for how long Stinger lasts in 2, in another game this would be considered a charge attack that deals considerable damage. You could throw out a charged Beowulf uppercut in the time it takes for 2's Stinger to finish, and not only does Beowulf have good properties, you can combo off of it. All you get off Stinger in 2 is another Stinger, a punch in the face, or gun attacks. Lucia's isn't as bad, but as if to rub salt into the wound, Stinger is your best option on getting combo ranks. Don't ask me how combo ranks in this game work. I can tell you for a fact that in 3, 4, and 5 that combos are based on doing damage and move usage. The player punished for taking damage and stale moves. Here, I can't tell if it's based on the damage amount or not. A fully landed 6-hit will barely get you up to D, while 2 Stingers in a row might jump you up to B, or not. The consistent way to get S in this game is by stingering enemies up to it and then finishing them off with guns, because any kind of damage or using the dodge will keep the ranking. This is what I mean by guns being overpowered in this game. Repeated gunfire is able to stun most foes for a stinger, where they will lie motionless on the floor for you to continue this cycle ad nauseum. Fights don't so much become a showcase of your character's moveset as they are an aging of a rancid cheddar, cheesing enemies with busted gunfire so that you can quickly stinger them. Oh sure, you can use other moves, but those don't get ranked as high as Stinger and have somewhat inconsistent properties, and jump canceling here is a chore to engage with. Attacks also operate on this bizarre Souls logic. If you throw out a move, be prepared to sit through its ending lag, an unfitting dilemma for this series. Not even dodging will get you out of this, so be prepared to eat damage through no fault of your own, as the designers thought this was a great idea. It wasn't. Anyway, this is the first game to include air combos off High Time, but good luck actually landing Aerial Rave here. Enemies fall faster than my morals when met with a hot evil chick, as only about 2 of the 3 hits in the air combo will land. And that is only if the enemy is able to be launched, which is like trying to determine where my face ends and body starts. This brings me to the enemies. Devil May Cry is a series that prides itself on an eclectic cast of monsters. One has probably my favorite lineup next to 5, both having a creative outing in terms of danger and strategy. 2 throws that out the window by separating monsters into clans and having stronger monsters be color swaps. Outside of the few that don't fit into that, like the golems and bosses, each monster in a clan is basically the same. All the Masira, Finnis, Mancer, and Goat enemies act the exact same way, with the only differences being subtle for the Finnis and Mancer demons. Every Masira and Goat monster might as well be a palette swap, with the Goats being the worst as their main factors if you can launch them normally or not. Once again, bringing the other games into this review, one had the Marionettes as the color swap enemy, but there were actual differences between all 3 versions. The Blades and the Frost fit under this too. Likewise, 3 has the excellent 7 Hells Demons, an entire clan consisting of Grim Reaper wannabes that each have a different attack form. From beginning to end, a Masira is not different from a Jomathasira and a Goatling and Abyss Goat. There's no progression in terms of difficulty as enemies don't change, they get a new coat of paint as if to disguise that fact. And thus, when I could get away with it surprisingly often in the game, as Devil May Cry 2 is too afraid of locking you into arenas on my self-proclaimed account that it doesn't want you to realize how samey the enemies are, I skipped over fights. Why should I waste a good 5 minutes of my life battling copy-paste in the soul-crushing way the game wants me to? It's not like the enemies want to keep me occupied either, they're AI lackluster and spacey. This takes me to the bosses. What should be highlights for Devil May Cry 2 and are generally considered the best part of a character action game are a total letdown. The lack of banter I've already brought up, but like the enemies, bosses are entirely susceptible to the gun strategy. Why put myself in danger with a half-baked combo system when I can blink away for free? Sure, my end level ranking hits a snag, but that's already going to happen with how combos work. Layered on top of that is some of the blandest and laziest boss design I've ever seen. Bosses don't so much as cycle through attacks as they repeat mostly one for the entire encounter. Only a few come to mind that don't line up with this. They being Bulwark, Phantom, Trismagia, and Argosax, but each have their own trappings. Bulwark is a 3-on-1 where not locking onto him will see your attacks aimed at his 2 wolves that act more as a hindrance than actual threat. Phantom is a noticeable step down in difficulty from his previous encounters. Trismagia I'll cover when mentioning other bosses like him, and Argosax is a boring boss rush followed up by a decent battle with Despair embodied if it weren't for DMC2's systems. While I can hit all with so boring it's a slap fight, special mentions go to the Infest. Not only are they a snooze, yes, I like fighting military vehicles with flesh growths on them, how did you know? They highlight a worrying inclination bosses head towards. Guns only. Infested Chopper, Tate Besu, Noct Petrin, and Trismagia can only be killed with ranged attacks. The opportunities to damage them with melee are few or non-existent. Better hope you leveled up guns, otherwise you'll be here a while. That's what makes Trismagia to me the worst boss in the game. First off, he comes out of nowhere, no foreshadowing, nothing. He isn't the only one in that regard, as DMC2's pacing is too fast for its own good, bosses coming right after the next. Where the division fractures for Trismagia is that not only is he a guns-only boss, his attacks are hard to determine how to dodge, and the amount of damage he takes from guns is minimal. The only attack that puts the hurt on him is DT guns, the flow of the fight leading towards that in a tiresome trance. Besides the Arkham boss in 3, for obvious reasons, Devil May Cry 2 is the only game in the franchise I've used items due to factors against the player. Trismagia and Argosax resting their case with a barrage of bullshit. At the very end of the day, what hampers Devil May Cry 2 the most is how it has so many ideas in its sleeve but never fully acts on any one of them. It only half turns in proposals that are sloppy and need refinement. At the core of Devil May Cry 2 could have been a good game. Everything is here to facilitate that. But that is only on paper. Playing it is an experience unlike any other, is what I wish I could say in a positive connotation. Instead, Devil May Cry 2 is like pulling hangnails, banal on the cosmic scale yet painful when it wants to be. The worst moments stick out like a sore thumb, but the in-between is all a blur. Whole levels, encounters, and items barely tickle my memories. I could have brought up how each sword and dagger only changes in appearance and properties, but the slog of combat washes that complaint under a sea of tedium. Level rankings have their own foibles, with the player needing to collect level red orbs to get good marks on that category, an issue apparent in 4. But what's the point? Am I really going to search high and low in these uninspired stages? And combat is ranked as well, so that already means I'll score low. Bonus areas for blue orb fragments are all the same, wave-based arena challenges, no thought-out puzzles or teaching the player gameplay tricks like with the Sin Scissors. The camera can be pulled too far back away from the action, making me feel even more disconnected from what I'm playing. 1 and later entries had the right idea to be snug enough to allow the player to see what they were doing, but wide so that enemies wouldn't be able to catch them off guard. The difficulty is laughable, challenge replaced with annoyance and indifference, especially so on the higher levels. Hard wasn't hard. Devil May Cry, a series built on testing player knowledge concerning weapons, movesets, and enemies, plus how they intertwine. Factoring out one or more of those or placing too much emphasis on one aspect throws the balance out of whack. In simplicity, that balance is the mantra of Devil May Cry as a whole. Devil May Cry 2 would have been a franchise killer if Itsuno didn't want another proper shot. Great sales be damned by me personally. It only confirms the adage that diluting the core of a franchise for mass appeal only hurts you in the long run. I mean, I've already told you at the start that this is one of my least favorite games of all time. The only compliments I can give to Devil May Cry 2 are backhanded, and my pimp hand is quite sore. The inclusion of style actions are neat, but they lack hard implementation. Style rankings are finally a thing, but they were dropped harder than this game. This might be the best design for Dante, but I'll just play Nocturne. Lucia could have worked if she wasn't here, and the core surrounding the game is rotten to the point that it's better. My only genuine appreciation for Devil May Cry 2 is that it serves as a teaching tool in what not to do with a character action game. Buying the collection is my only recommendation for 2, as it's sandwiched between 2 better entries, a solo purchase via the Switch, a laughable endeavor. Undershooting the mark as usual, I see. Guess I shouldn't complain that I crank out videos faster than others, especially since some of my favorite channels don't come at this with the speed I do. Means though that I do have to readjust my perceptions on time. Just wanted to say a not so quick thanks as myself to all in the Peanut Gallery, my affectionate name for my subscribers, and those in the inner circle, the people who personally know me and support this channel. For as sappy as this comes across, it wouldn't be possible without you guys. It would just be me screaming out into the blank void my indifferent thoughts on media I enjoy on the regular, which, I mean, I would still do. LTA is wholly self-indulgent, but the fact that there are people right now commenting on my videos, liking and subscribing, that's the only way you'll hear me say that phrase, blows my mind. Especially with how esoteric I'm making my show lately, because like any good personality-based YouTuber, I can't help but include a storyline that is meaningless even within the context of the show. It adds flavor, like spiking the eggnog at a Christmas party. This showing of Devil May Cry 2 is over, but stay tuned for our next feature involving an unkillable protagonist, a twist ending, and one man's unspoken love of Twin Peaks.